This is Unit 1, Lesson 3, Rereading Strategies. In this lesson, we're going to go over a few highly effective comprehension strategies. I'm calling them rereading strategies because this is what you would tend to use when you're going over a challenging section of a text. Of course, you can use these strategies at any time. So on our process chart, we've got 5 strategies listed. Chunking, paraphrasing, parsing, looking up unfamiliar words and expressions, and looking up extra information to build your background knowledge. We're not going to go over the last 2 in this video, so let me know later if you would like direct instruction for these. Starting with chunking. Chunking means that you're breaking the text into manageable sections and you're working through one chunk at a time. When you do this, you allow your brain to ignore large parts of the text, and this means that you can devote all of your brain's working memory to processing the information that's in that one chunk. So this is effective for the same reason that your internet works faster when you don't have 30 tabs open, all running different things at one time. Once you understand a chunk, then your brain doesn't give much energy to noticing it. It can kind of set it aside to focus on another thing. So chunking, it seems like an unnecessary step, but it's actually very effective. There's more than one way to separate a text into chunks. Pause the video here and go back to Google Classroom to click on the document that says examples of chunking. The document shows how the practice texts have been divided into chunks in 3 different ways. So text 1 was chunked sentence by sentence. Text 2 was chunked according to how the text was structured, like the shape of the argument. And the third text was chunked based on the key ideas from the subheading. If you have a physical text, you can use highlighting and notes in the margin to separate your chunks. If it's something that you can't write on, then you can use sticky notes or cover the page with a transparency sheet. You can also use paper or index cards just to cover up portions of the text that you're not focusing on. Again, visually, it just lets your brain ignore the things that it doesn't need to be focusing on just yet. So paraphrasing is when you restate or rephrase someone else's words in a way that makes it easier to make sense for you. Paraphrasing is really useful to understand idioms and expressions. It's also useful for breaking down complicated ideas. It's also another very useful way to study, because when you paraphrase somebody else's words, you're processing and rehearsing the information that you're trying to learn. We're going to try it out with the following slides. Live entertainment of all kinds is struggling to adapt to COVID-19, not only because of the financial blows it has dealt. Amid the gore and pageantry of the first bullfights in Spain of the COVID era, held in a villa on July 18th and 19th, the contradiction between drama and health precautions was especially stark. By now, hip-hop fans are all too familiar with the success that can come after an artist's untimely death. The answer may be humdrum. Here's a more challenging example. We'll do this one together. In May, ByteDance, the world's most valuable startup, leapt further ahead of other technology unicorns. It was valued at $140 billion on the secondary market, up by nearly half from a funding round in the spring. The reason? TikTok, a short video app that has been downloaded 2 billion times. The last sunny corner of the internet, as it is known thanks to jolly user-generated content, is China's first worldwide internet sensation. For ByteDance's 37-year-old founder, Zhang Yiming, it is part of an ambition to build a global software giant. So there's a ton of information packed into this paragraph. First thing we want to do is boil it down to its essential information. Who are we talking about? What did they do? And why do we care? When you look at it more closely, the subject of the paragraph is really focusing on the company ByteDance. everything else is kind of details that tells you who ByteDance is, and explaining things about what TikTok is. What did ByteDance do? The point of the paragraph is that it went way up in stock market value. That's what the news report. Yeah, that's what the article is talking about. And the point, it's really trying to emphasize how successful ByteDance is right now. So it's a little bit like paraphrasing and a little bit like summarizing, but I don't know, it's kind of a combination of these strategies. The way that you can tell if your strategies have worked is when you go back to the original text and you can see which parts you've covered with your summary or your paraphrasing and which parts are additional details. So hopefully rereading this now, it makes more sense now that you've read the shorter, simpler version on the next slide. Okay, the last strategy that we're talking about today, we're going to call it parsing. Parsing is actually an old-timey grammar strategy. People used to do this to practice syntax and learn how sentences work. It was called sentence diagramming as well as parsing. We're not using it to learn about sentence structure today, though. We're using the elements of sentence structure to break the text down into extremely, extremely small chunks. So we're going to walk through an example together, a longer sentence from the bullfighting article. Death may be the matador's stock in trade, but it can ambush even them. Some relatives of Alberto Lopez Simon, the weekend star turn, are among Spain's almost 30,000 coronavirus fatalities. So the step of this that is parsing, the first step is to split it up by the punctuation. So we have the clauses separated from each other. And if you wanted to, you could even split it up further into the phrases inside of the clauses. So already we have smaller chunks. And then we're going to tackle it one chunk at a time. Death may be the matador's stock in trade. Okay, stock in trade, if you looked it up, what it means is what a person works with in that industry. So novels are what are the stock in trade for ELA teachers. Yeah. So what they're saying basically it is that matadors are used to dealing with death because their job involves a lot of death. The next chunk is, but it can ambush even them. So we know that we're talking about death. Death can ambush even matadors. What does the word ambush mean? Death can attack matadors. Death can surprise matadors. Or even matadors can be surprised by death. That one feels like the closest meaning to the original. That's the best paraphrase. So far, if we're adding them together, we have the idea that matadors are used to dealing with death, but even they can be surprised by it. The punctuation can also show you the relationship between different ideas. So this M dash that's here, not the most common punctuation mark that you'll see, and it can mean a bunch of different things. So we're going to come back to it after we finished the second half of the sentence. Star turn, to look up that word, that means the best performance of the weekend. So this guy, Alberto Lopez Simon, was the best matador of the weekend. Okay. Oh shoot, I got those out of order. And who are we talking about? We're talking about his relatives. So death may be something that matadors are used to, but it can surprise even matadors can be surprised by death. Some relatives of the best matador of this weekend are among Spain's almost 30,000 coronavirus fatalities. So we're talking about people who died of COVID-19. It includes the fact that 30,000 people in Spain at the time of this writing had passed away from COVID-19. And the relationship between the second half of the sentence and the first half of the sentence, to go back to that M dash. It's like it's standing in for, here's a great example of what I mean. So if we were to put it all together, we have the idea that matadors are used to dealing with death, but even they can be surprised by it. A great example of this is the fact that the matador who had the best performance this weekend has lost relatives to the coronavirus. And I've cut out the part about the statistic because it's not super important to the meaning of the sentence. Okay, so your partner practice for this activity is to work through two kind of more challenging sentences in the rereading activity on Google Classroom. I'd like you to work with a partner so that it's not as daunting to break it down into the chunks, and so that you can see what strategies other people default to, which ones you default to. You can bounce ideas off of each other. And you're going to submit your work through a Google form so that I can see, so that I can see how it went. Your independent practice now is to go back to the practice article that you read last class and work through it. Work through all of the challenging parts using chunking, paraphrasing, and parsing until your comprehension feels like 100% solid. You'll also want to maybe incorporate the ones that we didn't talk about, looking up unfamiliar words and expressions, looking up extra info to build your background knowledge. The idea is that you want to really have a very, very solid comprehension of your article so that you can let me know when you're ready, and I will come do a quick kind of spot check assessment to see if you really understood the text as deeply as you think that you did.